the page called?
Lorraine Appleyard, psychic medium. Okay. Being live streamed. Here we go. I think we're doing it. Okay. Now let me just make sure that our sound is working properly. Actually, the sound seems to be working okay. I had an issue with it this morning. So we are streaming right now. So
Awesome.
welcome. I hope people are able to find us now. I apologize for the technical issues. And I believe I figured out what I did wrong with that, Barb. I created an event and then I did a live, and I think that because I did the event, I booked the event, it wouldn't let me invite someone. I think that that's what happened. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to, there we are. Okay.
I can't see the video on my end. I'm on your
Can you see me on your screen?
I can see you on Zoom, but I cannot see you in Facebook. So I just can't see the comments, but I don't really, I don't need to as much as you can.
Here. And let's just see if we can't share this. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. So the Lorraine Appleyard psychic medium page, right?
Yeah.
I can't see it.
Can you see this? I don't like these. Some reason it is on showing the comments there, and I really don't want the comments to show. It's got the, you're not able to see it, but it's got the comments like doing the words, doing the words underneath it.
Doing the words.
Okay, let's wait for people to join us here. Hopefully people are able to join us. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Lorraine Appleyard, and I have the lovely Barbara Quinton with me today, and we are going to be talking about mediumship and talking about demystifying mediumship. So I'm just going to wait to see if there's anyone going to be joining us, and I apologize for my tech issues that I've had today. So let me just see. And Barbara, are you able to see everything okay here? Are you getting
Yeah, on Zoom I can. I'm just while we're waiting on Facebook trying to figure out. And on your page I cannot see any kind of live stream.
You can say.
No, it doesn't mean it's not there. I just can't see it because usually we can do Zoom and then I can pop on and see it from our end, but on Facebook.
Let me just check. Let me just check to see if it is going here. Okay. Okay, so Barb, thank you very much for joining today, and I apologize again once more for my tech issues. I'm hoping that people are going to be able to join us and see me. I will post this afterwards so that people are able to review this. And I'm not seeing who's joining us at this time. So again, I'm hoping that I'm streaming it properly. So Barb, we wanted to talk about mediumship today, and we wanted to really sort of talk about demystifying it and making it, just taking some of that mystery out of it. I know that when people think about mediumship, if they're not already on the path, they tend to think that mediums are special, or that that they're gifted in some sort of extraordinary way, or that even that is not obtainable to the average person. And so I know that you teach also, and how would you sort of want to be able to help someone understand the process of mediumship if you had to be able to explain it to someone that didn't know?
Well, I think the most important thing is for people to recognize that they are an intuitive being and that we are all made of energy. So intuition and energy are key players, I think, in the understanding, and really normalizing it for people. I think a lot of it has to do with the media and how we are portrayed as mediums, or people who, you know, use their mind mentally for mediumship or physical mediumship. You know, so I think that allowing people to understand that they too are intuitive beings by taking their everyday and kind of placing it open for them and saying, like, you know, you have intuitive hits every day, you know who's going to call, you know, things that are going to happen, like the basic sixth sense that we have. And then people start to understand, yeah, okay, well, take that a step further. So intuitively, you're picking that up because we're an energetic being. Every single thing is energy. This cup is energy, you know, our house is energy, our physical body is energy. So placing that, again, just being like, you know, you can be intuitive and have that sixth sense, and you can also connect with everything else around you. So on a mediumship level, and really telling people that, you know, about energy and how that works, it makes more sense where you say, you know, whether someone's in spirit or whether someone is in the physical body, we can all still connect. And so all that really is just moving your awareness to, instead of the everyday sixth sense, moving your awareness to spirit that comes in. So, and the energy.
And I like the way that you talked about that we're all energy. And I think that people have difficulty understanding that concept that we are indeed just energy. And it's just that we are in a physical body, right? Like we tend to, I know we tend to think ourselves as humans, right? And it's this sort of the dense physical being, and we forget that there's actually a spiritual aspect to ourselves, and that what we're aware of is our physical body because that's what's visible to our eye. But there's a much larger aspect to ourselves that is not visible to our eye, and you know, we may get those senses of energy when we meet people, and we are getting a sense of whether or not we like them, whether or not we feel like we're on the same sort of wavelength. We actually, when you think about it, we actually use sort of terminology to talk about energy all the time in our everyday lingo, like talking about our wavelength, or talking about, you know, we're not vibing, or talking about, you know, that we're on a different wavelength. And when we start to think about it in that respect, we start to realize or recognize that we really are energetic beings, spiritual beings. And I think that that's actually really important for us to start to sort of recognize as individuals, is that we are indeed spiritual beings. So I like the way that you talk about energy. And the thing is, I believe, is that what happens is that because we're not able to see energy with our physical eye, we tend to, it's really what happens is that our brain is sort of conditioned to see things just sort of that denser vibration. Just, we think about physical as being something solid, but it's not actually solid. It's actually mostly made up of space. It's just our physical eyes actually have kind of tricked ourselves to just seeing the denser vibration of things. So I like the way that you're able to describe that, and those intuitive hits. So if you're talking about intuitive hits, how would you be able to help someone understand if they're actually getting an intuitive hit during the day? What might someone actually sense or become aware of?
Subtlety. Subtlety, you know, it's, you get those hits not because you're thinking about it, it just happens. It's like off the cuff, blink of an eye, you know what I mean? It's not, there's no like conscious thought about requesting it, or maybe we're open to it, but it comes quick.
So, you know, when you said that, what really actually struck me the moment when you said that was that you said it comes to us. And what happens, I think, a lot of times is that our mind is just so busy and active that we're not creating that space in order to actually be aware of those intuitive hits, right?
Yeah.
Like, how many times have you been going about your day and you've been stuck in your mind? You've been having some repeating thoughts, just sort of having your thoughts looping through your mind. And as you've really sort of consciously thought about something, and then the moment you sort of set that aside, that conscious thought, you get that moment of revelation, you get that moment of insight, and that would be intuition, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, people can train, but I don't think people recognize their power, their ability. And I think that, like you're mentioning at the beginning of development, or even just in the beginning of acknowledging our abilities, that's key to have awareness of, is the subtlety and how it comes across. So I think that even as a teacher, for both of us, that's what we teach, to look for the subtle cues, to be able to work toward quieting that mind, and to be aware of how we hold our energy and what that looks like when we extend ourselves and receive. So it's about learning that surrender, and just to begin receiving information, impressions.
So you know what I really like when you said about that, you talked about you don't recognize the power that we have. And that to me is really very significant, because that to me means that there's more to us than we actually really understand. Right? Like, for the everyday person, that there's more to us than we really truly understand. And it's just a matter of being able to connect with that. So when we talk about being a spiritual being, I think that starts to allow us to sort of connect with the idea of power. And so I think people get misled about that idea of having power and spiritual being a spiritual being. So if we're actually start to recognize ourselves as something greater than what we may have been led to believe, I think that's where we can start to actually open up and start to maybe really connect with, actually, now this is just coming to me, connect with our soul, right? So like that would be sort of part of the first steps of understanding mediumship, is to recognize that we are indeed souls, right?
Definitely. Soul having a human experience. We hear that over and over again.
And I think, yeah, you're right. We do hear that over and over again. And so, but what's funny to me is that I think people sometimes have a difficulty sort of connecting with the idea of a spiritual being, right? That might kind of seem a little bit out there. But when you talk about being a soul, I think that makes it a little bit easier for people to understand, or to connect with that aspect a little bit more, being a soul. And it's not that we have a soul, we are souls, right?
Yeah, for sure. I did. And I think, like, right away when you say that, I think of myself. I grew up in a religious home. So when I hear anything that sounds remotely on a religious level, I go, oh, right. So naturally, even though I've grown past that, it's still kind of like a trigger for me. So when I think soul, even I think if we bring that one step further for people, that's like, the word soul is what? It's the essence of who we are. Right. So we just bring it to a different level for people, and a different approach. But yeah, we definitely, we are the physical body, and we are an energetic body. And I agree. We live our life, and we need tangible things. We need logical things. We need time, and we need answers, and all these things that kind of kick us out of our intuitive self. So development is crucial, I think, to just understanding the basics of that.
If you wanted to help someone connect with the idea of their soul, what would you want to talk about? How would you be able to help them explore that?
I would bring them right to their clairsentience, right to their feelings first. I think that our intuition, whether someone is practicing being an intuitive or not, is the key player here. And so bringing someone to the feelings of who they are, to the feelings of life, to the feelings of everything that's going on around them really opens up an understanding on a very relaxed and neutral level about the soul, about what we are as energy.
So you talked about clairsentience, and if someone was not familiar with the idea of clairsentience, how would you describe that?
You're feeling, baby. Yeah, it's just your feeling, your everyday feeling, whether it's an experience, whether it's something that you're feeling, or the receiving of something. It's just it's our senses that open up, and when I think of feeling, it's like that intuitive nature of coming from your gut, your instinct, your sixth sense. Yeah. What about you? How would you explain it?
Well, I like the way that you talk about that in your feeling, but you know what as you're talking about, I've really become aware of this of the idea is that we disregard our feelings all the time, right? As people, like I feel that we get a lot more than we actually truly will allow ourselves to recognize, and we disregard it. And it's almost like we have this hierarchy of what's important, of what we will of what we'll accept. And so really I think that in our Western world, in our Western civilization, we have this hierarchy of what is truth. And in order for it to be true, in order for us to accept it, we have to be able to have it sort of in this physical form that we're able to look at and be able to sort of see and quantify. But where I feel that people actually just get lost is that our feelings, our intuitive self, is that we're not able to quantify that. And we disregard the feelings all the time. Like, I know that people get intuitive hits, getting guidance from spirit all the time. They might think of a thought, they might be having an experience, and then suddenly they'll have this impression come to them, they'll have this feeling come to them. But because it doesn't align with where they're at consciously, they just sort of disregard it. And I think that that's really where people, it's important to be able to sort of recognize is that we've actually been really conditioned. You talked about religion. You talked about how if it goes against sort of your religious upbringing, we tend to be kind of not open to it, right? We tend to shut it down, and we want to maybe be able to sort of put it in the woo-woo box, kind of put it in the category of that's not real, that's all woo. And I feel that there's a certain amount of deconstructing that we have to do. A certain amount of sort of tearing down and really looking at what we have accepted as truth, because that's what we've been told, whether it be through religion, through our parents, through going through our school system. And we've been told certain things. And so we've actually, I believe that we're really very strongly programmed in our Western culture. And it's a matter of sort of tearing down that belief system and really sort of starting from scratch and understanding that in a way we kind of, it sounds harsh to say that we've kind of been tricked, but in a way we've been misled, right? That to not accept ourselves for who we truly are. So for instance, religion talks about God or spirit being outside of us, right? So it's outside of us. and if we're good, if we follow certain rules, then we're able to achieve a certain state. But it's always through an intermediary too, right? Like it's instead of recognizing that we are actually spirit, soul ourselves, and that we have a divine aspect in ourselves. But for some reason, that actual statement becomes really difficult for a lot of people to accept, that we are divinity, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're taught that we are less than in most occurrences in life. Like every experience, it's always like, well, there's someone that's better, bigger, stronger, got more money, or more something than you are. So, but coming into your own on a spiritual level and recognizing really gives you a sense of personal power. But it's a huge barrier to break through. Really being honest and starting to believe it. I'm actually teaching people the beginning of intuitive and mediumship development. And that's the first thing they say is that they're just unsure. They're unsure of what they're getting. They're unsure about what that looks like to trust themselves. And we have conversations about, where does this come from? You know what I mean? It comes from really family, from friends, from religion, from life experience, from the job you work, everything. So you literally have to kind of retrain yourself to allow a different perspective to
Right. No, let me see if I can't invite Barbara now. I've got my notes here. I did something. I pressed a button, and it's not what I wanted to do, because then I get some feedback. So hopefully I don't have any feedback. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. No, I was just on the tail end of what I was saying. I heard your Facebook come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that just kind of reprogramming yourself and retraining yourself to learn what real self, or like trust in self, is in the beginning of development. It's very important.
And that's right. Those really are the first steps for development. And I know, another barrier for people to actually with their development is actually fear around it, right? Like fearful that they're doing something wrong, that they're doing something evil. I'm going to say it because, listen, I grew up in a very structured household. So when I talked about spirit, or talked about the experiences that I was having, I was told that it was of the devil. So and that, that there was a real structure to be able to be had. So I feel that a lot of people actually, that they really struggle with this idea of fear around mediumship, and it's because of having this religious upbringing, right? So how would you sort of help someone navigate around that?
Well, I think first and foremost, acknowledging where it comes from is key. Like you said, growing up with religious expectations. And I think too, a lot of it's media and television, like all the stuff that we're fed is fear-based. And, when you're watching a Hollywood movie, that's what gets us to pay the money to go see the movie. But in reality, it's very different. And it's like retraining yourself to kind of think a different way. But like I said, starting with understanding where the fear comes from, and then working in the energy of spirit through development, really, in my mind, or through meditation, or any kind of thing that kind of puts you in the energy of spirit. And you realize very quickly, when you're working in the highest good and from the heart center, that the energy that you receive is exactly what you give out. It's of a higher form. It's of a loving vibration. It's healing. And people, how do you know that? You can feel it. Again, that clairsentience, that clear feeling that we use in our day-to-day, you receive that in the work that you do through development. So,
because that was going to be my next thought, is that a lot of people actually, and I do actually think that it is due to Hollywood, like as you're talking about, that a lot of people actually, they're fearful that they're going to meet up against something really kind of dark and ugly and scary in mediumship, right? So I want to talk about the purpose of mediumship and how it operates, and how do you feel that anyone has anything to fear with mediumship?
No, definitely not. Just themselves.
Yeah, yeah. So we touched upon, sort of what you put out there is what you get back. And so it sort of really goes back to us being energy and being within this energetic field. Now, I believe that mediumship really does operate through this faculty of love, and that as a result, operating through that higher faculty of love, operating through that higher purpose, that there isn't really anything to fear with mediumship. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And, I think a main reason too is because of where you're coming at it from, the angle that you're coming at it. You didn't come into it for, to harm people. You were trained, and that's another topic into itself, is who you're taught by, as far as what are you being taught? Are you being fed more fear-based information, or are you being taught that is of a higher vibration, and messages? Are you focusing on the healing and the loving aspect of it, or is it something different? But
and
yeah.
I like that, Barb, to that point, talking about how you're being taught and what are your motives sort of around it, or what are your goals, talking about that love and the whole motivation around that. I really believe that when you are having that aspiration to have a more of a connection with your soul, to have a greater relationship with spirit, with source, whatever we're comfortable calling it, and to be able to bring healing forward when we have, because I know that people will sometimes get caught up in what they think mediumship is about, and it would be cool to do that, or and it's maybe a little bit sort of ego driven. But really, when we think about the purpose of mediumship and what it's all about, it is meant to be healing, right? And it is meant to be from a point of love. And I believe that when people really hold those values and really sort of embody those values, that they're able to unfold in their development, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So if someone was really very sort of stuck on the religious aspect of mediumship, and felt that it wasn't I suppose right, or like it really went against their values, we do hear this a lot. How would you talk about that? Like, is mediumship, do you consider that something that is a gift from God? Would you consider, how would you talk about it if someone says that mediumship is bad or evil? Or because I know I've heard it, I'm sure you probably have heard it also.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, I think, there's a difference between being skeptical and being cynical, and I don't really engage at all if I know that someone's cynical, like they're just totally black and white. I'm right, you're wrong. I don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? But there's something to be said about someone who questions things in a healthy way, but is not completely oblivious to there being two sides and not so stuck. So I think I would gauge that first in any conversation, is like, where are they at with it? We have experiences with our loved ones, whether it's you feel a tingle, a presence before you're falling asleep, goosebumps when, a song comes on and reminds you of mom who passed last year. Like all of these very subtle, very loving opportunities that spirit comes through. And I think that engaging with someone who is maybe skeptical, that if you approach it in that way of like, let's talk about your everyday life and talk about what that looks like, your experiences with spirit, or how do you feel God? You don't even have, it's also in the way you word it. So it's not like, dead mom. It's talking about, how do you feel God? What does that feel like? The tingles, you know what I mean? Like, so are we energy? Yes, we're all energy, right? I am, you are, and that's how you blend. That's how you blend with your God, through your heart center. So the same thing goes when you're connecting with mom who comes through, who showed you a song on the radio. That's the energy and the impression. So it's like helping them to connect the puzzle pieces if they're open to the conversation.
Right.
If they're not, it's like, I would step back out of respect and I've wasted time on both ends. I'm not here to help anyone turn them over. But
That's a good point. I like that. So I'm just sort of, that brought up two things to me, the way that you talked about that. So one is about being a skeptical versus someone that's really very close to it. Because I'll be honest, I believe that having a healthy skepticism is really important. I am a skeptic. I won't take just anything. I have a healthy skepticism. I feel that that's actually really important to just to be able to navigate our own journeys. That it's important to be skeptical, but we also, there's an element of needing to be open too, because I know for myself that if someone is really very closed, it doesn't matter how much evidence you bring forward that you have their loved one connecting with you, that if they're super closed, then they're not going to be able to receive it, right?
yeah, that's true. It's like an energetic.
And the other point that you were talking about, that talking about how do you connect with God, and I really feel that sort of really ultimately is that there are a lot of people out there that don't know how to connect with God, or because of their own religious upbringing or negative experiences, they're very, very close to the idea of God or spirit. So sometimes if I'm understanding that someone's sort of close to that idea, I'll talk about the universe. I'll talk about it in that respect, so that they might be able to be more receptive to it. Because if you're not receptive to it, it becomes really very difficult to be able to get anything out of it. But I find it's just a matter of sort of opening up that sort of crack of that perception, just a crack, to let some of that light in. And it's just to be able to bring someone to that state. But so once we're able to, so I would, if someone was watching this and they were really struggling with the idea, with the concept of God or the concept of mediumship, I would just sort of ask them to be able to contemplate. And contemplation it's a learned thing. So it's almost like a meditative thing, but it's being able to really empty your mind of any preformed concepts that you might have, in order to be able to receive those insights. Because if our mind's all full and if we're closed, then we're not going to be able to receive. But I do believe that everyone gets these impressions or insights. But if they're really wanting to contemplate on being able to say what is God or what is source or what is mediumship, then they have to be willing to bring themselves, so this just came to me, to bring themselves to like a 0.0. Whereas I am open, I'm going to sort of throw away all of my understanding of all of the learning, all of the sort of, I'm going to use the word indoctrination, but I'm going to throw away everything that I understand or believe to be true about God, spirit, mediumship. I'm going to put that all aside. I'm going to start with sort of this empty receptacle. and I'm just going to contemplate. And so when we contemplate, is really sort of putting our thoughts out there to see what it is that comes to us. And then it's through that process of allowing that space. I'm sure everyone's heard this sort of saying before, that the universe abhors a vacuum. But it's when you create that space that you're allowing for that, it creates this vacuum in order to be able to have this information or this flow come to you. And so, and really that's what needs to occur in order to be able to be able to receive anything or get some new insight. So I like the way that you phrase that, because I feel that that's going to be really helpful to people in understanding mediumship. So in the end, when we're talking about demystifying mediumship, I mean, I do think of mediumship as being a mystical experience. Like, do you? Yeah, you would agree? Yeah.
Very much, yes.
So, and that also can sort of throw people for a loop. We're saying, well, it's a mystical experience, and how would you define that? And for me, it's a state or an experience that really is without words, that you have to really be able to experience it in order to understand it. And it really can't be, sort of summoned up. It happens spontaneously. So we learn to be able to bring ourselves to a certain state or a certain, I guess, a certain state or a certain level of experience in order to be able to have that further experience. But how would you describe it as a mystical experience? How would you be able to put that into words?
Your definition was great.
Oh, okay.
The whole time you're talking, I'm like, how am I going to explain this?
It's difficult, right? Being able to explain it. And I think that just being able to, just saying that is that you can't explain it. You have to be able to have that experience to understand it. And sometimes I kind of want to be able to say it's like leading a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Like, you can give all of the keys, all of the cues to be able to bring someone to that experience. But in the end, they have to be able to have that experience on their own, right? Is that, would you think that that's true?
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I wanted to say about the experience from my end, and it happened the first time that I did mediumship, and it happens when I do it now. So there's a few years in between the beginning and this time here. But it's the feeling that I walk away from, is because in mediumship we blend, right? And I work in my mediumship to really become one with spirit as much as I can in that moment. And it's so uplifting, and it's like I touched heaven. I feel like, and when we do some circles and stuff together and demonstrations, and it's like I feel high when I walk away. I'm hungry as anything and thirsty, but I feel vibrant and awake, and I feel like I did service. But there's something that's like the closest to God or to the universe that I can be in this physical body, is when I do mediumship, for me personally.
It's funny the way you talk about that high, and mediums will talk about that, right? They're on that spiritual high that, they've just done a reading and they're having this high, and it can be, it is a high. It is really difficult to be able to put that words, but so I suppose if I wanted to really articulate, it's being in this really very, very high vibration, and this state. So we talk about mediumship occurring in an altered state, and how I'd want to be able to explain it to someone if they're wanting to achieve this. And I believe that everyone experiences altered states, and that they're just maybe not aware of it. I mean, we all daydream. We all dream when we're sleeping. That's an altered state. So have you ever been daydreaming, or have you ever been sort of just really feeling like you're in that flow, whether it be you're playing a sport and all of a sudden you're sort of seeing the ball come to you and you're able to react in sort of like in this really sort of real time way, and it makes you feel almost like it's surreal. I feel that that's that state that mediumship occurs in. And we talk about surrender with mediumship, and I know that that's kind of an abstract term also, to about surrender. And well, how do you get to this place of surrender? It's like, well, you just surrender, right? But and again, that becomes difficult to be able to define, because it is this altered state, and it's this expanded state where we're no longer in our sort of our conscious mind, but we're in this higher state of awareness. And I do believe that everyone experiences that, whether it be you're driving home from work and you've forgotten how you've gotten home because your subconscious has kicked in, and it's just sort of taken over. Or we talked about, you know, being in those sports and having those moments of flow. Or even if you're at work and all of a sudden you're just having insights or impressions flow to you, that's being in an altered state. And I think that perhaps maybe what it is that as humans we want to make things a little bit more difficult than we need to, right? Like we want to be able to sort of like understand, or just put it in a really, that's our human logical mind, that we want to be able to have that constructive, right, that definition, right? But we're talking about something that's not of the physical. We're talking about something that's really subjective, right?
Yeah.
And you know what just came to me as I'm talking about this now? It's like when someone says, well, what does love feel like? How do you know when you're in love? And it's like, well, you just know, right? And that's kind of like, right? That's kind of like what that experience is with mediumship. It's you just know when you're in that altered state, when you have an experience, you just have it.
That's what I was gonna say. When
Is
you were
that awesome?
talking, yeah, when you were talking about it, I was like, that's the first thing that popped into mind, is a feeling of love. And, you know, like, and again, what you said is that we get so caught up, even the word surrender, and we're like, what does that mean? But it's just like allowing. And so what does full allowing feel like? It feels like being in love. It feels like the love of sitting with your child when there's not a care in the world and you're just connected. It's that feeling of love when you're outside and you just feel the energy around you and everything is good and like just perfect. It's that, you know, listening to a good song in the car and you're just feeling in the groove and everything's good. Like those are the moments that are tangible for us to be in naturally in our physical state. That is the best explanation. I love how you put that.
And so, and actually just the way that you're describing it too now, Barb, that makes me just, it brings me to sort of being in the now, right? So we're not in the future, we're not in the past, we're not thinking about anything, we're really just being present and open to this experience, right? I loved it how you talk about sort of as a mom, sort of holding your child, and because to me, there's no better experience of being in the now than when you're like looking at your newborn and having that feeling of love, and there's nothing else that's sort of present or nothing else that's going on, but in a way that's kind of like mediumship, right?
Yeah, it's like that high vibe, that high vibration that you're in, where you're opened physically and emotionally and energetically. It's just that flow that you're talking about.
And so, and when you're open like that, so when you just open energetically, I like the way that you're putting that, then that's when we're able to receive these impressions from spirit. And it's just sort of like being in that flow and just giving these impressions, or just understanding these impressions of what's coming through. So I like the way that kind of fit together.
Well, when I do teaching, that's one of the things, or like if people inquire about like what the classes look like, for example, and I always say I've been taught where it's been so structured and so many rules and so unfun that it kind of made it harder for me, I feel like. So when going into a scenario where I get to tell someone else about what works best, I say it's about allowing and getting out of that, and just like being in that creative open space. And you do that by having fun and by being with people that you like, and you know what I mean, like creating experiences for yourself. So I think the thing that would kick us out of any flow is having a stress, or having that mind come in being like shoulda, woulda, coulda, you know,
having that mind coming in. Absolutely. So again, being in that conscious mind. And I know we talk about on a spiritual journey, the difference between the lower mind and the higher mind. So whenever we're in our lower mind, in our sort of human mind, that's what blocks the experience of mediumship. And it's learning how to shift from that lower mind to your higher mind. And we do that by bringing ourselves, well, certainly, like you said, being in a higher state, allowing that excitement, allowing that higher vibe to come through. But it's a matter of teaching or understanding how to bring yourself to that state. And the more that we learn how to bring ourselves to that state, the more that we're able to receive. And so as we're talking about that, and we understand that we're all souls, would you agree that everyone's able to develop mediumship to some degree or another?
I do. I think it's all about the passion and longing to do so. You know, I know that some people would strongly disagree, but again, I go back to basics. I've never met anyone who has said that they have never had a tingle or like, you know, goosebumps in certain parts of their day in connection to someone who has passed, or a knowing that you're not alone. And you know, I could be wrong, but in my experience, I've never met anyone. And so I start there. I'm like, that is connection. And again, that flow, that feeling of that creative flow, or that being open and connected to the universe, that too is connection. So it's not just about with someone who has passed, it goes way beyond that. It's more of like that universal connection, soul to soul as well.
And you know, just as you were talking, and sometimes as we're talking, it really sort of helps to be able to put things into words, that knowing, or that experience of that there's something greater than yourself, right? And you can get that whether it be looking at a sunset, you know, looking at something beautiful, again coming back to that mom and child experience, where you're just having this sort of this feeling that there's something greater than this physical. And it's and being able to, and so the difference is for me is learning how to do that sort of, because we all have it spontaneously, I agree, but then learning how to do that at will. Learning how to bring yourself to that state at will consciously. And that's where the development is. That's where that guidance is.
Yeah.
And I agree that we're all able to achieve this. Some are able to achieve it quicker or faster than others, certainly. But we're all able to achieve this. And I really feel that that's what I want to be able to emphasize as a takeaway, is that we're all able to achieve this. How long will it take? Or, you know, we don't know. We can't predict that. Or to what degree? Again, we can't predict that. I feel that there's a lot of factors involved with that. And in part of, I believe that is between the individual and God, individual and source, as to what that unfoldment and development looks like. That's what I would really want to be able to talk about. So is there anything else that you would like to bring forward, Barb? Like if someone came to you and they're really wanting to understand mediumship, and you want to help demystify, I really think that we've done a good job of demystifying mediumship. But is there anything else that you would want to sort of bring forward before we wrap it up?
You know, I like kind of what you said about everyone has their own time to develop, and it looks different for everyone. I think that again, the demystifying of that certain people can be mediums and certain people can't, and just really recognizing and honoring our own journey in the development. I was super sensitive my whole life, and I had little inklings of and little experiences that kind of made me question, but in no way do I recall any sort of like waking up with someone at the foot of my bed, or you know what I mean, like seeing any of these things. And I think a lot of it was because I didn't have knowledge of what that was growing up in a religious home. I just didn't know what that was. But I think again, just going back to everyone is different, and it took me it's still taking me. I practice a ton, you know, step by step, and just really processing and understanding and connecting with people and talking, and even helping other people. I learn every step of the way too. So just I would encourage people to honor their journey and go with the flow and do things that make you feel good in your development. And you know, the last thing that we need is to stress ourselves out and to put all these stipulations on what it should look like based on someone else's, what they say and how they're telling us it should be. And just take everything with a grain of salt. When you listen to someone, hold on to it so that you have that knowledge, but you don't necessarily have to take it and hold on to it as your own gospel, really about how you're going to do things. But just honoring yourself and recognizing that everyone is different, and that with practice it will get easier and things will flow.
Yeah, you know, I agree with you. I think that one of the biggest barriers that we can put upon ourselves is putting these expectations upon what that journey is supposed to look like. And I really feel that holds us back more than anything. And so I would agree, just learning to sort of let it go and enjoy the experience. And although you may want to set intentions around that, really just allowing and not comparing yourself to others or having expectations as to what that looks like. In part for me, that's because it's not just about ourselves as the individual. It's about spirit, it's about God, it's about source, and we're having this experience. And I agree with you about that development being ongoing. I really feel, well, I've heard mediums that have been professional mediums for 40 years, and they will say, I am still learning. That, you know, even after 40 years, I am still growing and developing. And to me, that really speaks to the eternal nature of the soul. And if we're eternal, how do we ever really truly stop growing, right? We're continuing to evolve. And so I feel that just having that understanding, or just keeping that in the forefront of our mind, I feel that takes a lot of pressure off. And it's that pressure that really sort of will impede any development. Wouldn't you agree?
Completely. And I like what you're saying, you know, about the timeline at which we grow. And I find with my development that a lot of the time I'll have life experiences in the way that they're supposed to unfold that actually helps me in my mediumship and development and spiritual journey here. So it's like, if we're trying to rush our development too much, I think we're missing some of it, missing those physical worldly experiences that kind of help us to grow on a soul level, that kind of intermingle and enrich our mediumship development. So I think it can be a test of patience and but I think it's well worth taking your time at it. So
I like the way that you put that. Thank you. And I want to say thank you for just having this chat with me, having this talk. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that those that are watching and viewing afterwards have enjoyed it and have gained something from it also. But Barbie, if someone wanted to connect with you, what's the best way to be able to do that?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me too, Lorraine. www.redfernhealing.com is my website. And then on Facebook, so Barbara Quinton. And I think I'll probably be posted to this chat. So just feel free to friend me and connect with me through Messenger.
Awesome. Thanks
Yeah.
again, Barb. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
And once again, my name is Lorraine Appleyard, and this is Barbara Quinton. And if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on my page, Lorraine Appleyard Psychic Medium. And you may connect with me also via email at soullightsobright@gmail.com, and follow me also on Instagram. And thank you again for joining us both today. And we wish you all very many blessings, and may you walk with spirit. Bye for now, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Barb. Bye for now. Talk
Thanks.
to you
Bye.
soon.
Yep.